Guatemalan Spanish is actually, it's one of the easier to understand, like the easier accents to understand. In Chile, there are a lot of Spanish schools where people from the U.S. will come to learn Spanish, kind of like an immersion technique. So it's actually one of the easier to understand. It's not very fast. It's very clear. They pronounce all the letters. In other countries, they'll drop S's or they'll speak really airy. But in Guatemala, it's really clear. In some of the further areas, they'll sing. They'll go up and down, up and down. But for the most part, Guatemalan Spanish is really clear. Now there's a lot of things, words that are unique to Guatemala, and adopting those words actually helps you quite a bit. I'm not saying speak informally to people, because as a missionary, you don't speak informally. We're required to speak in the form usted, right? But adopting some of those words like chumpa, which is a coat. In other countries, it's chaqueta, right? Saying some of those words just kind of helps people feel that you're more like them. Helps them connect with you. So trying to speak like a Guatemalan and kind of adapt their way of talking, it's not as difficult as other ones, and it helps you out quite a bit. But Guatemalans, they're very easy to understand, and they're very helpful too if you don't understand. When you're learning, you ask them a question and they'll help you work through it. And honestly, learning Spanish with the Guatemalans is one of the best places to do it. That's why the Spanish schools there are so successful, because it's one of the better accents adapted for people trying to learn. Chumpa, chucho is dog. There's a lot of slang words, like they'll say in Mexico they say que chido, which is cool. You're like, oh, it's awesome. Guatemala will say que chilero. They'll say oh, chulo, that's beautiful. Instead of saying cool, they'll say calidad, which is quality. Literally translated, it's quality, but you say you'll say something like calidad, that's so cool. You know what I mean? For example, when you're learning Spanish in the U.S., they'll either teach you tú or usted, right? They do have a form that's unique, a unique form of addressing people. It's more for people that that you have confidence with. It's called vos, which someone used really like Guatemala, I think in Honduras and in Argentina. You'll hear that a lot. You don't speak in it as a missionary, but just trying to help. It's kind of a unique thing to Guatemala. It's a lot more. It's very, very informal for people that you're really good friends with. That's kind of a unique thing to Guatemala, that they speak in vos. But for the most part, Guatemalan Spanish is straightforward, easy to understand. They don't make it difficult on you. With the city Spanish, it's Spanish, right? But when you get further out, when the people are learning Spanish, they have different accents depending on the language that they speak. And the less they've learned, the heavier their accent is. So I remember one area, there's this one lady, she spoke Quiche. Quiche was her main language. She struggled a lot with Spanish. And there isn't really a word for elder in that language, so they would say brother when they were speaking that language. But when she tried to speak to us in Spanish, she, instead of saying hermano, which is brother, she said something like hermana, which sounds like sister, right? But just because her accent doesn't really let her say the O, she'd always call us sister. We understood. Also in those areas, just the accents, it depends on the language they speak. So the accents do change, but it doesn't make it harder to understand. It's just a different accent. It's just kind of the pronunciation is different. Some of the letters sound different, but nothing difficult.